Good morning everyone, and I welcome all of you to Approach to Anthropology. I'm Dr. Sudhir Kumar, and in this session we are going to talk about language, communication and culture, right? You can say the interrelationship between these things: culture, language and communication. Let me first give you a brief about this program. Right, in this program I just open up this topic and I will take one question from previous year questions, and that I will deal elaborately, so that I will give you the structure of that question, right? What are the essential elements that are required to address that question, right? And overall approach, that how you can address the questions. Okay, so first of all, we have to deal language, right, and communication, and that is cultural reality, right? See, what distinguishes culture, right? We humans are the only beings, according to anthropologists, that possess culture, right? And that is because of this symbolic use of language, right? This symbolic system makes this a reality for we humans, right? That is the basic thing, that we try to understand the relationship between these three things. Okay, so first, let us try to understand what is culture, what is language and what is communication. So according to E.B. Tylor, who was the classical evolutionist, who wrote the book Primitive Culture in 1871. In that book, he defined culture. He says that culture or civilization, taken in its widest ethnographic sense, is that complex whole that include knowledge, morals, art, customs, and any other capability or habit which is acquired by men as a member of society, right? So culture is learned, culture is acquired, culture is transmitted, culture is shared, right? And why all these things? How it is transmitted, how it is learned, right? So how we learn culture? We learn culture through language, right? Because our parents, our near and dear ones, our friends, everything, or you can say teachers, they teach us, they help us in enculturation, right? So this enculturation or socialization is through language, right? How one learns culture? It is through this enculturation process, in which language is very, very important. The second thing that you have to see, how culture is transmitted from one generation to the other. So language is again important. Culture, how culture is visible to the outsider, in that the symbolic system language is important, right? So you can say it is essential for the development of culture, right? Now, do you think that language shapes cultural behavior, right? That is one hypothesis that was asked in 2020 question paper also, right? That is Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It says that the structure of language, you can say the semantic structure of the language, it influences the cultural behavior, it influences the thought process, it shapes the worldview of an individual, right? So Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It says that language influences culture. Right? Earlier we were looking at how culture and language are interrelated, right? You can say whatever I speak, right? The choice of words or anything that I try to communicate with you, somewhere I have my cultural background, the choice of words, the tone that I am using. Okay, if I am Haryanvi, so naturally there will be some elements of this Khadi Boli, right? If I am Punjabi, so I have the Punjabi tone. So don't you think that culture is shaping my language, my tone, or you can say my gestures, my body language, everything. So in this chapter, our purpose is to understand the interrelationship, right? The second thing that you have to learn in this chapter is the origin of language, right? When did the language originated? Some say during the Homo erectus period, because Homo erectus were doing big game hunting, right? And big game hunting require coordination. There were evidences of large bones from the tool traditions of the Homo erectus period that also suggest the same, right? The presence of gene, FOXP2 gene among Neanderthal says that they must have language, right? So there's a debate whether it was during Neanderthal period or Erectus period. So these can be clubbed into the biological aspect, or you can say biological theories that try to help us decode when did language originated, right? The second aspect is the social theories, right? Some says that it is divine, language is divine. Some says that it is because of some necessity, right? Some says that it is because of the learning from the natural sounds or from the animal sounds. So from there language originated. Various theories and their criticisms we have to deal, right? And finally, what is the use of language in this society? Okay, the social context of language use. There are many theories, there are many scholars who try to understand this aspect. Now, let me decode what communication and how you can see this aspect, right? See, communication can be human communication, non-human communication. See, we humans communicate using verbal means. You can say this language, as well as we can communicate non-verbal means, and that include the gestures that I am making, right? You can say kinesics, the hand movement, the body language, the cheek movement, the forehead movement, everything comes under the gestures, right? Then the pause that I am giving in between the words, right? The tone modulation that comes under the paralanguage. Okay, if some people are standing just closer to me and I am just whispering something into the ear, right? And with some people I may not be very comfortable and I am making a little distance. So the proxemics, right? The distance between the people also add up to that non-verbal communication, right? Non-human communications are primarily non-verbal, but now researchers suggest that they also have calls, right? They give calls, some kind of sounds they make, and using those sounds, the other members of the same species can understand if there is any danger, right? There is a case study on vervet monkeys, right? The vervet monkeys, they use many types of, you can say, calls, 3 types primarily, to alert their the species members, or you can say their group, about the oncoming danger, right? So there are 3 calls, one they make for python, one they make for eagle, one they make for leopard, right? And the response of the vervet monkeys to the different calls is different. Suppose if there is a call for eagle, so all vervet monkey will look up. That suggests that that call have a symbolic aspect similar to what we use, right? So that we will talk someday other. I'm just giving you some idea that normally we say that non-human communication is primarily non-verbal, but nowadays the researchers have found that they also use some sort of verbal communication which also have a symbolic tone. So that we will talk some other day. Now I will take Sapir-Whorf hypothesis as a question for today. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis was given by Edward Sapir and Lee Whorf. Both were working independently, although Whorf was the student of Sapir, but they never gave any hypothesis combinedly, right? We just try to club this hypothesis using their ideas, their writings. Okay. What this hypothesis says, it says that the structure of language, right, the semantic structure, or you can simply say structure of language, influences the cognition, which in turn is responsible for the cultural behavior, because this thought, whatever you think, you behave according to it, right? So this says that the structure of language it influences cognition, or you can say thought, and this influences your cultural behavior. You can simply understand that whatever I think, this hypothesis says, whatever I think, my worldview, right, my way of thinking is shaped by the structure of my language. Suppose some word is missing in my language, maybe say I speak Hindi, right, and some word is missing, right, that represent some phenomena or any concept, or you can say anything that is happening in the world. So I may not have any sense of that. In the hardest form, this hypothesis can be seen in that way, because my cultural behavior, my thought process, my worldview is shaped by my language, right, and whatever I can think from the perspective of that language only, because I don't know anything about the other concepts which may be present in other languages. This hypothesis was influenced by the Boasian relativism, right? It was influenced by Boasian relativism, that every language is unique, right? Every language is unique. That is what Boas say. Boas' concept of cultural relativism, that was adapted by Sapir. He was the student of French Boas, right? And Whorf was the student of Edward Sapir. So basically it was influenced by Boasian relativism, right? This is also known as the theory of linguistic relativity. Right. Okay. So this is this hypothesis. Now, how we can say that it is really happening, or it is, what is the basis? So Whorf studied Hopi language speakers, right? Hopi language of North America, and he compared with English, right? He says that Hopi speakers do not have a sense of time, right? For example, we in English can use that 2 years after, 4 years after, 3 years before, tomorrow, today, day after tomorrow. So we have a sense of time. The same thing is not there. The same sense is not available to the Hopi speakers, because their language do not have the sense of time. That was his argument. So what he was saying, that language shapes cognition, and that is how it is shaping the cultural behavior. So that was the argument made by him. There are some supporters of this hypothesis, like who studied Alexander Goeria. Alexander Goydia, he studied the behavior of children who were grown up in 3 different linguistic groups, right? He studied Hebrew speaking children, right? Then English speaking children, and Finnish, Finland, right? And he tried to understand the level of gender identity, right? He was trying to understand the gender identity among the children of these 3 linguistic groups, and what he observed, this Alexander Goydia, okay, what he observed, that Hebrew speaking children, they have a very stable gender identity. Why? Why they have a very stable gender identity? Because the Hebrew language have all nouns are either in all the nouns in Hebrew are either masculine or feminine, right? Whereas the Finnish speaking children, they have least understanding, or you can say least stability of gender, right? Because they hardly use, their nouns hardly use gender. In English, it is in between the two. The reason is that in English speaking children, they use nouns in 3rd person, right? He, she, they, them, right? So basically he, she, her. So everything is in a 3rd person. That is how you can say that the English speaking children have less this consciousness of gender. Now basically these 2 examples, one given by Worf and the second by Alexander Goydia, that supports that whatever was said by this hypothesis was right, correct and proven, right? So you have given these 2 case studies to prove this answer, right? So 3rd thing what you did, case studies, one by Worf and other by Alexander Goydia, right? These 2 case studies prove this, okay, that it is correct. Now basically this hypothesis have 2 versions. One say that yes, it shapes the cultural behavior, and the other says no. Basically there are some critiques of this linguistic determinism. See, this hypothesis was criticized, and from where that criticism, we say that there are 2 versions of this, right? So first let's deal with the criticism of this. It is criticized by many scholars, and most prominent among them was Noam Chomsky. Right? Steven Pinker and Lenneberg. They rejected this hypothesis as they say that it is linguistic determinism, right? They rejected that language does not determine every aspect of cultural behavior. There can be other aspects, there can be other factors in the culture that also shapes our cultural behavior. How you can completely say that only language shapes our cultural behavior? So this linguistic determinism which is visible in this hypothesis was rejected, right? So the first thing is Noam Chomsky says that there exists universal grammar among the children, right? So that is how they rejected it. Then there is another scholar, Malotki. Malotki studied Hopi, right? He studied the archaeological data, calendars, historical documents and the speech of Hopi, and he says that there is no evidence among Hopi right? That they lack sense of time as conceptualized by Worf, right? So Malotki, after elaborate study of Hopi language, right, and all the data that surrounds it, he rejected what was said by Worf, right? But there are other scholars who basically criticized Malotki, right, and they say no, the analysis done by Malotki was on the wrong parameters. Now, when you criticized this, right, don't you say that it is completely rejected, because there are some neo-Worfians, right, who again revived, they again revived this hypothesis. Okay. Now, to revive this, you can just give example of this cognitive behavior, right, therapy. See, the language, the internal communication, the internal dialogue that we have, that is also a form of language, right? So, you can say the internal dialogue we all have an internal dialogue, we talk to ourselves, right? कभी गुस्सा आता है तो हम अलग तरीके से बात करते हैं, कभी किसी से बात करनी है तो, right? अगर किसी के साथ कोई भी अनबन हुआ है तो हम अलग तरीके से अंदर से प्रोसेस करते हैं उस इंफॉर्मेशन को, right? So that is internal dialogue, and naturally internal dialogue influences your thought process and that influences your cultural behavior. So what we can say that in a weaker version, yes, language influences our cultural behavior, but it does not completely determine our cultural behavior. That can be your firm and solid conclusion, right? So what I told you the introduction, I told you that from where this hypothesis was influenced by the Boasians, you can say, right? Then you write about the two case studies that I have given. You can criticize it by these two type of scholars, and then you can just show the revision of it, right? So to just show it that in today's time also it is slightly valid, may not be completely valid, right? But yes, there is some influence of language on our cultural behavior. So in a weaker version, this hypothesis is valid, not in the stronger version. So I believe I did justice with this question, right? So thank you for watching, and keep watching. We will come again with a new topic and with the new question the next day, right? So thank you, take care.